In this video, I'll be spending 25 days in Iceland. I went on this trip through Norkurs, so this was no vacation but a study travel to learn about the Icelandic language and culture. Iceland is an amazing country, so besides hopefully being entertained, you can use this video as a small taste of what Iceland has to offer, as well as what Norkurs has to offer in Iceland before you go here yourself. Because nothing I'll be showing you here is anything like experiencing it in real life. With that said and out of the way, let's start the journey. Kat and I got up so early on the first day that I completely forgot to get any photos from the day of travel apart from this one photo of me and my study partner Mads in front of Aalborg Airport. We flew from Aalborg to Copenhagen and from there to Keflavik, from where we took a bus to Reykjavik, where we were to live for a whole month in a really nice apartment right on the city's main street. Classes started the very next day, so we decided to explore the city a bit, and we found out that the university was quite close to our apartment, just next to the National Museum, and that the city center with the cathedral wasn't far away either. On the second day, the study started and we met the teachers, the course leaders, and the other participants in the course who came from all over the Nordic countries. It was very difficult at first to understand the others, but we all stuck to speaking only our own mother tongue and never switching to English, which was a great and fun challenge that became much easier as the days went by. The view from the university was absolutely fantastic, and although I probably sound very Danish, I come from a very flat country. I never got over the view of mountains that could enchant me every day I were in this country. One thing that's good to know about Iceland is that the hot water smells like farts. Yeah, and that definitely caught us by surprise. It's not that bad, it's just because the hot water comes from their hot water springs. Which has sulfur in it, so that's why it smells. And yeah, again, it's not that bad, you get used to it pretty quickly. But we were quite confused about it the first days we were here. And also on the first morning, my roommate went to the shower while I was still sleeping, and I woke up by the sounds of him in the shower going yeah, but it's not that bad. You get used to it pretty quickly. On day 3, we learned about the alphabet and letter pronunciation. I, U, A, Au. We had a history lesson and then went on a guided tour of Reykjavik, where we saw the presidential residence, the church on the site of the first settlement in Iceland, and the old harbor with the craziest view of the mountains. The study continued and we learned basic sentences, while every day after school we wrote a diary, only in Icelandic of course. Opposite our apartment was a very natural cemetery, and it was simply so beautiful. Now I won't show any pictures from inside it, as I think it's a bit inappropriate, but the graves were all unique and filled with relatively wild-growing flowers, plants, and trees that provided homes for the city's birds. So amazing. One of the teachers was actually Danish, but I were on the team with the Norwegian-speaking teacher, which was a little scary at first, but it actually helped me to better understand other languages than Danish more quickly. After the lessons, there was an official welcome in Norræna Huset, and then we ended the day with a concert in the city. This was the first big excursion day in Iceland, and please do keep in mind, I'm gonna try and say these cities and things in Icelandic, but it's super difficult to change between English and Icelandic, so okay, but anyways, here we go. We traveled by bus through the Hvalfjarðargöng to Borgarmýrum, which was the home of Egil Skallagrimsson, a real person from the Icelandic sagas. From there we drove to Reykholt, which was the home of Snorri Sturluson, the author behind many of the great sagas, which was an insanely cool experience for me, as I'm a mega literature nerd. From there we drove to Hraunfossa and Barnafossa, which is probably one of the most beautiful places in Iceland. Last but not least, we drove all the way around Hvalfjörður, past Þörðufoss, down to Thingvellir, which is a national park with a very visual part of the divide between the European and North American tectonic plates. This was the first real day off, and it was spent doing homework and writing the diary. However, we also found time to go down and have a look around the city, where the lake here was one of the many highlights. On day 8 we learned about verb conjugations, which was quite a mouthful. We also heard about Iceland's geology and the many volcanoes. At the end of the day we went out to watch a national team soccer match, where Iceland took on Israel in an exciting match. Soccer is very big in Iceland, and it was a very special experience to be at an Icelandic soccer match. The next day we learned more about nouns, and the author Frida Isberg talked about what the literary scene looks like in Iceland, which, like everything else, is completely unique. At the end of the day we went up to the cathedral, Hallgrímskirkjan, which is one of the most impressive buildings I have ever seen. The design is inspired by Iceland's mountains, and the church's walls are made of cement, reinforced and decorated with gravel from the mountains. Now it was time to learn about verbs in the past tense. Yes, we had to learn a lot every single day. After all, we only had 1 month to learn a completely new language and understand the country's culture. After the lesson, we saw Alþingi, Iceland's parliament, and we learned a lot about the country's political system. Next came the course's first task, in addition to the diary writing, where I had to have an Icelandic conversation with a local Icelander. It was quite nerve-wracking to stop an Icelander to try and speak their language to them, which I had barely practiced for a week. But it went well, and it became much easier to speak Icelandic after this experience. Day 11 continued with pronunciation exercises and grammar, but we also went down to the harbor to check out the amazing view. Today was Iceland's National Day, and it was great fun as a Dane to participate in a day of celebration where the whole country celebrates that they have escaped the Danish rule. The day started with a traditional ceremony, mainly celebrating Jón Sigurdsson, who was a decisive figure in Iceland's independence. Then there was a big parade with music and also trolls. It was super fun, and there was a big festival in the park for the rest of the day with many activities, among which I was probably most captivated by the beautiful vintage cars that stopped along the bridge across the lake. Today is the day of our second big excursion. Despite the many stereotypical jokes about Swedes and Danes being like cat and dog, my study partner and I took 3 Swedes on an adventure, and we all survived the trip. First up was Raufarhólshellir, which are underground tunnels made of solidified lava. From there we took a trip out to Kerið crater, which is a super beautiful lake located in an old volcano, after which we drove to Haukadalur, which is a super beautiful area with beautiful nature, mountains, and most importantly, geysers. The highlight of the trip, and perhaps the whole travel to Iceland, was at Gullfoss, which is the biggest and most beautiful and craziest waterfall I have ever seen. It was so breathtaking to watch, and the roar of the thousands of liters of water traveling from the top to the bottom of the falls was both violent and almost terrifying, but at the same time it was incredibly calming to just stand there and listen to it. Finally, we drove as close to Hekla as we could possibly get, which also resulted in an official warning that is sent automatically when you are within risky range of a volcano. Hekla was very beautiful, and at the same time it was a bit exciting to be so close to a volcano that could statistically erupt at any minute. Also, there was these super aggressive biting volcano flies that made it very difficult to take a picture where everyone was standing still. Besides seeing the Danish embassy, the next few days were just homework and classes. It was undoubtedly a busy but educational trip. On day 16 we learned about Icelandic arts and architecture. The architecture in Iceland is very different. Gravel decorated concrete, tin walls and roofs, copper roofs, and well, whatever this is. So even though there is a lot of concrete due to earthquakes and harsh weather conditions, it is still used very creatively. After the lesson, I had to do an interview with an Icelander, which was, again, both difficult and a bit nerve-wracking, but it was much easier to speak Icelandic with an Icelander now for the second time on the trip. On day 17, we ate an Icelandic hot dog, but let me tell you one thing, this is not a hot dog. Many people, and especially American YouTubers, has hyped this so-called hot dog so much, but the truth is that this is a big misunderstanding. In Denmark, however, we eat tons of delicious, tasty hot dogs, but in Iceland there is one hot dog cart, and it is only stupid tourists like ourselves who bought from it. No Icelander, and for that matter no one else who has already tasted this cheap copy, or actually very expensive copy of a real hot dog, will ever eat it again. Everything about it is tasteless and boring. I am convinced that the Americans have misunderstood which country they could buy delicious hot dogs in and then spread this misinformation. So listen to me and help spread the truth that the Icelandic hot dog is not worth an experience. The hot dog is a lie. Thank you very much for listening to my rant about hot dogs. Back to the video. The next day was spent preparing a presentation for the following day where I would talk about my YouTube channel. The task was a 10-minute presentation followed by answering questions from the other students. All in Icelandic, of course. For the presentation, I talked about my love for the color magenta, my YouTube channel, my videos, erratic craft, and a bit about Minecraft in general. In the evening, we went to Midsummer, a tradition that is actually Swedish, but for a Dane it was super boring. The Swedes dance around with wreaths of flowers and sing, while we in Denmark, for our version of Midsummer, burn witches on a big fire. This was the day of the last excursion of the month. We drove out to some smaller, cozy towns in Iceland, saw the beach church, and finally visited Gunnekver. Gunnekver is a large hot spring that emits a lot of smelly steam, which was really fun to walk through. It was like walking straight through a giant fart. Now I know this might sound silly, but it was honestly pretty funny standing in the middle of the stinky steam where you could see nothing but whiteness. On this day I can't really show any pictures or video because I spent the day at the Penis Museum. Yep, Iceland has the world's largest collection of penises. Or peni. I don't know what the phrase is. I heard about this museum many years ago, so I had very high expectations for it, and it didn't let me down. So did I really just go and look at peepees all day? Yeah, pretty much. I looked at penises from all kinds of animals and read about the very interesting facts about various animals' mating rituals and penis characteristics. Did you, for an example, know that a blue whale ejaculates a whopping 20 liters of semen? Or that the mouse has the biggest balls in the animal kingdom? Best of all, there was also a section on the peepees of fantastical beasts. So yeah, it was definitely worth the visit. With day 22, the final week had started. We were super busy this week, but not busy enough for the university not to invite us on a guided tour of the National Museum. The history of Iceland is very interesting, and after the tour I actually went through the entire exhibition again on my own just to take it all in. This day was spent correcting and handing in the entire diary and finally practicing the oral exam. We were divided into groups that had to talk about a topic in front of the whole class and then answer questions about it. We were super busy and nervous for the next day. We got up early to practice our oral presentation with the others before the exam, and it all went very well. The rest of the day was spent preparing for the written exam the following day. The last real day in Iceland had begun, and this was going to be a busy one. First the exam, which consisted of a listening exercise, grammar exercises, a reading task, a writing task, and finally a task about Iceland's culture. It went really well, although we had only been learning Icelandic for 24 days at this point. After the exam we had to clean the apartment because we had to leave super early the next day. And at night there was a closing party. It was super cozy, and it was as if now that the pressure of learning and the exam worries were gone, we all talked and had more fun together in this one evening than we had done all month. So it was surprisingly sad to say goodbye to everyone when we left the party. And if you were on Norcourse with me, I just want to say that it was super nice to meet you and hang out with all of you for this entire month. On the way home to the apartment, I was struck by both relief and also sadness at the same time. Now a busy month in a foreign country was over, and I was finally going home to my fiance and my cat again, but at the same time I didn't want to leave. Iceland is definitely a country I will visit again in the future.